Services Committee and a longtime student of history, John McCain brings a distinctive perspective to this subject. 13 Soldiers tells the story of real soldiers who personify valor, obedience, enterprise, and love. You'll meet Joseph Plum Martin, who at the tender age of 15 fought in the Revolutionary War. Charles Black, a free-born African-American sailor in the War of 1812, and Sam Chamberlain of the Mexican-American War, whose life inspired novelist Cormac McCarthy. Then there's Oliver Wendell Holmes, an aristocratic idealist disillusioned by the Civil War, and Littleton Tony Waller, court-martialed for refusing to massacre Filipino civilians. From their acts of self-sacrifice to their astonishing bravery, these 13 soldiers embody the best America has to offer. Please give a round of applause for Senator John McCain.
And assuming that we just go now. Okay. My name. It's not. It is on. Hold it close. I want to make sure I can get it much closer. Can everyone hear? Okay. My name is Bob Timberg, and I'm here to talk to Senator McCain in a way that I like to think you guys would all like to talk to him. And I'm going to ask him 2 or 3 questions, and then we're going to open it up to anybody out there that wants to question Senator McCain. By the way, we are talking about Senator McCain's book today, and not about John Boehner or other things some of us might be tempted to ask. But Senator, tell us, how do you think of this book?
Well, Bob, before I answer, can I say thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Book Festival for everything they do to help enlighten and educate our citizens. And I thank you all for being here. And thank you for not mentioning that I lost running for president of the United States. After I lost, I slept like a baby. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. So, and I look forward to responding to any questions or comments, and I will give you my view on John Boehner, as if you haven't heard enough views. But first of all, I would like to thank my friend Bob Timberg, a veteran of the Vietnam War, Naval Academy graduate, wrote a wonderful book about me and 4 other graduates of the Naval Academy called The Nightingale's Song. And it's about Oliver North and John Poindexter and Jim Webb and me, and it's and Bud McFarlane. And it's sort of how the Naval Academy affected us and molded us as we went through different aspects of our life. One of them is still trying to run, in case you missed it, Jim Webb is still trying to run for president, you know. Anyway, you know, that it's also been said that if you're a United States Senator, unless you are under indictment or detoxification, then you automatically consider yourself a candidate for president of the United States. So, and I want to thank Bob for what he wrote, not only about us, but about the life we led in those days, in the 50s and 60s, and then how the Vietnam conflict shaped all of our lives. It's a very interesting book. Now, on this 13 Soldiers, we tried to portray an individual from each of the major conflicts that this country has been involved in, how they interacted with their situation and how their lives were affected. For example, an African American named Charles Black, who was part of the United States Navy. A lot of people don't know that African Americans in the War of 1812, and on our warships, sometimes as much as a third of the crew were African Americans, even though back on land there was still strong sentiments for slavery and all the things that accompanied that in those days. So he fought in the Battle of Lake Champlain, which was one of our victories over the British. And then many years later, he was beaten very badly in a race riot in Philadelphia. So we also tried to bring in a bit of the contributions that young men like Joseph Plum Martin, who joined the Continental Army at age 15 and went through incredible sacrifices, to someone like Oliver Wendell Holmes, who fought in the Civil War and was wounded. And obviously he was the Brahmin class in Boston and ended up, of course, one of our great jurists, as you know. And of course we have young women like Monica Lynn Brown, who fought bravely in the Persian Gulf War and as a medic, and frankly, her performance should resolve any controversy whatsoever about whether women can be in combat or not. The fact is, her example and many other women, certainly in my view, and I hope most Americans believe that women can perform equally as well as men, in fact, sometimes better than not always. So Bob, in long answer to your question, we want readers to know the life and experiences and the contributions and the trials and the attributes and qualities, no matter race, gender, station in life, that a common aspect of them is that they were willing to serve causes greater than themselves. And that's really what I think our lives should be about, as much as we can. And that's why we chose these individuals, men, women, African American, Hispanic American, to try to portray to the reader that it doesn't matter where you came from, and it doesn't matter what your gender or race is. There is a common theme, and that is you're ready to serve your country, maybe not always gladly, maybe not always inspired to do so. Maybe you were drafted. There was a period for a couple hundred years where we had the draft in our military, as you know. So, and we hope that people would learn from it and being motivated to serve, as I say, a cause. And frankly, in the world today, which has not been in more crises since the end of World War II, I'm sorry to tell you that we may be asking our young men and women to go out and serve and even sacrifice when we see the challenges that we are facing from outfits like ISIS, who behead Americans on the internet and burn a Jordanian pilot to death in a cage. We're facing a very implacable enemy that would like to come here and attack us. And in my view, we're going to be asking young Americans to serve again. But I'm also confident that those young Americans will serve with valor and courage and honor.
Senator, if I could just follow up, this is my old newspaper roots catching up with me. But we're asking young Americans to serve again. How exactly are we going to ask them? What's the process by which we suddenly have young men and young women daring to fight?
Well, let me remind you that there was probably the greatest upsurge in patriotism in recent history after 9/11. I've met so many men and women who said, after 5/11, I joined up. I went into the Peace Corps, or I went into AmeriCorps, or I joined. There's a famous story, of course, of our fellow Arizonan, a young man named Pat Tillman, who was playing professional football at the time of 9/11 and quit that very lucrative business that he was in, joined the army and tragically was killed by friendly fire in Afghanistan. So I believe that when young Americans see our fellow Americans in being beheaded, for example, when they see whole sections of people with an emphasis on Christians, ISIS' first target is Christians, and taking these young women into virtual slavery, that I think they'll be motivated to serve the country. I'd like to mention one other story real quickly to you that still grips me. There's a young woman from Prescott, Arizona, named Kayla Mueller. Kayla Mueller was endowed with a desire to help our fellow human beings. So she was working in a hospital in Aleppo as a volunteer and was treating people there. She was captured by ISIS, and after a couple of years she was murdered. I went to the memorial service for Kayla Mueller in Prescott, Arizona, and I saw videos of Kayla saying, I want to devote my life to serving others. I want to devote my life in the cause of helping those who are not as fortunate as I am. And I can tell you, I will not forget Kayla Mueller, and I will not forget that those people who murdered her are our enemy. And we are going to have to stop them, my friends. Otherwise, they will export that evil to the United States. And obviously, that is one, they don't want to convert us, but they do want to attack us. The leader of ISIS, as I'm sure you probably know, is a guy named Baghdadi. Baghdadi spent 4 years in an American prison in Iraq called Camp Bucca. At one time, we had as many as 25,000 prisoners there. When Mr. Baghdadi was released after 4 years, on his way out, he said to the Americans, he said, I'll see you in New York. Mr. Baghdadi wasn't kidding. And so I believe that young Americans will respond, and they will try to stop this evil, which is really affecting so many parts of the Middle East and is a danger of spreading.
Thank you, Senator. It's nice to know that somebody has this kind of faith in this generation being prepared to take on ISIS. All I can say is we'll see.
Well, could I just add, Bob, I spend a lot of time, as much as I can, with younger people, my children, their friends, a lot of the people that I hire to work for in my office are young people that have just graduated from college. And I'll tell you, I believe that this generation of Americans is more superior in many aspects than my generation, than our generation was. I really do. And I think I can substantiate that with AmeriCorps is oversubscribed. The Peace Corps is oversubscribed. We have more young people who want to go to the inner cities of the Indian reservations and teach than the program can possibly handle. I happen to think that young Americans are more willing to serve our country, frankly, than my generation was, and I'm proud of my generation.
Well, if I could just add, we are all proud of your son, who was a Marine, who served in Iraq.
Terrible mistake.
Yeah, right. It adds a degree of class.
Could I mention that many of you know the friendly rivalry between the Marine Corps and the Navy. And I've often said that when I graduated from the Naval Academy, I tried to get into the Marine Corps, but my parents were married. And my Marine friends aren't too amused by that. So my son Jim, at 18, goes out and joins the Marine Corps, comes home and says, you know, Dad, the Marines are part of the Navy Department, the men's department. So there you have it.
Senator, we get back to your book. You chose 13 people. 3 of them, I believe, only 3 of them are officers. 2 of them are African Americans. two are women, and they're also fascinating, but I'm wondering, what was the process by which you essentially decided these were the people you wanted to write about?
Well, as you know, Mark Salter is here with me today, and we are longtime friends for many, many years. We worked together in the Senate, and we wrote books together, and we vacationed together, and we socialized together, and he's literally a brother to me. And so Mark did the majority of the work. We would sit down and talk about various things that we wanted included. We would look at a variety of people. Some I had read about, some I'd heard about, some had had a very close connection. For example, one of the chapters is about a guy named Leo Thorsness. Leo Thorsness ended up in prison with me in Hanoi. But the reason why I wrote about Leo Thorsness was because of an incredible engagement that he had as a fighter pilot over North Vietnam, where he literally risked his life time after time because one of his fellow pilot and other co-pilot were on the ground. And he fought off MiGs, he shot out MiGs, he got his plane shot up, he went back and refueled 3 times. It's a great story. It's a great, incredible story of heroism as he attempted to make sure. In those days in Vietnam, we had helicopters that would be in Thailand, and if a pilot was downed and it was in an area where they could, the helicopter would come in and pick up the pilot. Well, that's not so easy because, as you know, the Vietnamese had artillery and anti-aircraft capabilities. So what Leo was trying to do was protect these guys while the helicopter came in, shot down 2 MiGs while he was trying to save them. It's an incredible story, and I ended up with Leo in the same, actually near the end, in the same room in prison in Hanoi, because after that heroism, for which he was nominated and later received the Congressional Medal of Honor, he was shot down a couple of months later by a surface-to-air missile and joined some of us, the hospitality of the North Vietnamese. And so Leo is a very one that's very close to me. And the other one is the story of Pete Salter, Mark Salter's father, who was in the Korean War. And they were up north. Some of you may recall, after initially breaking out of an area called Incheon, we went all the way to the Chinese border, way overextended. MacArthur thought that we could secure all of North Korea, and the fact is the Chinese came down and drove the Americans all the way back south of Seoul. And MacArthur either didn't know or didn't want to know that the Chinese had moved in, like several 100,000. And when they struck, then that's where the famous Marine retreat at Chosin Reservoir took place. Well, Mark Salter's dad, Pete, was in a company, and they were way up north, and they were surrounded by the Chinese in a night attack. The Chinese used night attack tactics, and there was a Native American named Mitchell Red Cloud, who was from a tribe in Wisconsin, and he had been in World War II. And to make a long story short, Mitchell Red Cloud was fighting and firing to try to stop the Chinese from choking off the point where they were retrieving, and he was wounded and asked them to tie him to a tree so he could continue fighting, trying to keep this alleyway open for the rest of his comrades to retreat. The last Pete Salter saw of Mitchell Red Cloud was him firing and holding off the Chinese, and Pete Salter's father, Pete Salter, got into a hand-to-hand fight with one Chinese where he literally choked him to death, and then the next day they told him to go back up. And so it's quite a story, and it's all about Mark Salter's father and an incredibly brave Native American named Mitchell Red Cloud, for which on his reservation in Wisconsin, I'm happy to say there's a memorial.
Maybe it's only fair to actually ask Mark Salter, who was here a few minutes ago and may have run for his life. I heard Senator McCain start talking about his dad, but if he's here, I wonder if he could stand up and, there he is. In case you're not aware of this, Mark is the co-author of this book and has been the co-author of other books that he and Senator McCain have written, including the Faith of My Fathers, which was essentially Senator McCain's autobiography up to the point where he was running for president. So, Mark, we're happy you could join us. You should be up here and not back there, but so it goes, right? Ghostwriters wind up having to hide their under a bushel basket. At any rate, I think we ought to.
So could I just mention, and I'll be glad to ask a question. We chose one person from every conflict. Beginning with Joseph Plum Martin, who joined when he was 15. Incredible personal story. Was at Valley Forge. Went through enormous trials. The personal story, really, of the Revolutionary War, to all the way up to a guy named Mikey Mansour, who was a SEAL team guy, and two of his comrades were on the roof of a building in Iraq, and a grenade was launched, and he had a choice either to save his own life or that of his two comrades, and so he saved the life of his two comrades and fell on the grenade. I was at the White House when his family was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's very hard for us to comprehend that kind of sacrifice, and it can only come about because of an incredible bond of friendship and love that is forged of men and women in combat. And I thought it was kind of a good idea to end up with Mikey Mansour's incredibly heroic story.
I'm going to open this up to the audience. I just have one last question, and I hope it doesn't, if I'm not asking more than is reasonable, but I'm just wondering, you did every conflict that the United States has ever been in. How did you choose these people? What was the process?
We looked for individuals that we thought epitomized the times as well as diversity. Joseph Plum Martin, I think, was, when we think of Valley Forge and the starvation and the privation that they went through in that winter, the Revolutionary Army, Joseph Plum Martin was part of that. He was the classic example of a young man who not only volunteered, but he was also paid. He was paid to serve as well. To people like Oliver Wendell Holmes, who not only went through the crucible of probably the greatest bloodletting war that America has ever or will ever. When you look at the number of casualties on both sides in our Civil War, we've never been in a conflict like it. And so Oliver Wendell Holmes used that experience, and the searing experience. He was wounded. It was a very gripping story. His father wasn't sure he was alive or dead, and went down and toured the battlefields looking for his son's body, and found out that he was wounded but alive. But Oliver Wendell Holmes became one of the great jurists of our time. But he used to carry his lunch to the court every day in an ammunition box. He gave a couple of really stirring, wonderful lectures about the meaning of war and sacrifice, and he was, to me, the intellectual voice of what the meaning of war and sacrifice is all about.
I'm opening this up to all of you out there. If you have a question, just raise your hand. And I think we're going to have to ask you to speak loud because I don't think we have a... Or else you come up here. Here. Oh, there's a microphone. What do you know? Is that what that thing is? I thought it was a big tire.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I have a question. I have a comment and then a question.
Yeah, would you just speak a little closer to the microphone?
Okay. As an African American, it was so gratifying to hear you talk about the contributions in your book. And the second thing I like to say, when the question of Obama's patriotism and whether he was born in this country, I just thought it was just so great that knowing your stature, that you took the time, because I think God always gives us time to say what's right and what's wrong. How would you address some of the divisiveness that we have in the candidates that we have, and not really realizing that this country was based on diversity and everyone is valued in this country, regardless from what side of the world they come from? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. In our book, almost not by accident, but in the evolution, we celebrate diversity in our book because we tell the stories the way we do. I'm very concerned about the level of discourse in the political campaigns today. I believe that in 2008, I was defeated because it was the judgment of the American people. But I'm not ashamed of anything that I said or did in that campaign or embarrassed, nor do I believe that President Obama is either. I think it was a difference of ideas, a difference of vision for America, a difference that is the fundamentals of our democracy, two opposing philosophies discussing their views and trying to convince the majority of voters. Now we're talking about whether a Muslim should be president or not. We're talking about things that, to me, are not only inappropriate, but my God, we have more crises in the world today, as I mentioned. We have tens of thousands of refugees that are now fleeing Syria, Iraq, and other places. In other words, I think the American people that are going to vote deserve a discussion, not of the past, but of the future and how we are going to address these issues. Thank you for your kind words. It means a lot to me.
Anybody else?
There's a young man right there. Here's a microphone here if you don't mind.
You're next.
How would you compare the officer leadership, the generals of our military today to the past? I have heard that the generals in the last 10 years have not been as high quality as in the past, and I wonder what your thoughts are.
You know, it's funny. Serving on the Armed Services Committee for all these years, and now I'm very honored to be the chairman, which is a product of old age, not of virtue. I have had the real pleasure of meeting these military leaders because they come before our committee for the major positions, for their confirmation. The president nominates them, and then we have a hearing. And to be honest with you, we have never turned down a uniformed nominee of the President of the United States. We have turned down civilian nominees, but not military. And I have to say that have really been impressed by several of them, like General David Petraeus. I've never met a combination of inspirational leadership and intellect as I have with General David Petraeus. General Odierno, that just retired as the head of the United States Army. General Dunford, that's going to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But I also have to tell you, in all candor, there are some that come up the political ladder and and are not of the quality of leadership that I would like to see. And I would not like to name them because I don't think it would be fair. But I have seen the majority of them are really outstanding people. But there are some that kind of take the political route that frankly I am not as impressed with. Thank you for the question. But let's one other thing about these officers now. They have been, the Army and Marines in particular, they have been to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times. Some of these lead generals now were first lieutenants and captains back in 2001, 2002. So this is really a generation that has grown up in war, probably like any other. Sir.
Yeah. Just so you understand why we seem to be a little confused about picking people out to speak, is that those banks of lights are shining in our eyes. And everybody looks kind of like a shadow or a hologram or something.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you, Senator McCain. Thank you for your service. I just want to add, my son went off to Parris Island just last week.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. We're very proud.
Please don't tell him that joke that I
You write about Oliver Wendell Holmes, and one of the things that Oliver Wendell Holmes was famous for was a case called the Schenck case, which is clear and present danger. So as a segue, do you think you could use that precedent and convince 51 of your colleagues to change the rules and not vote funds for fishery?
The issue that is now roiling the Republican Party, and as a proud Ronald Reagan foot soldier in the Reagan Revolution, it disturbs me to see all this infighting and impugning of character that's going on within our party. I would, and a lot of people in this room don't know and don't care and shouldn't care, but what some people are saying, that we in the Senate should go to 51 votes to pass legislation rather than 60 votes, and allege that that will be the answer to all our problems. We will be able to get things done. We will be able to pass laws and repeal Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood, all of these things. Well, the fact is that the Constitution allows the President of the United States to veto. So it requires a 2/3 majority of the House and Senate to override a President's veto. So suppose we went to 51 votes, which is the way the House is, and just simple majority rather than 60 votes, and we passed all this legislation that they want passed. The President vetoes it. Does anybody believe that he can override the President's veto? As far as I can tell, that's not the case. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Because also, I did say my wife was also one of those women you spoke to who is also a veteran. So,
Thank you.
I love the way you mentioned about different kinds of service.